if you'd like, I can tell you the whole story of my existence in the military.
Yeah, that would be great.
Which goes from 1944 to 1966. So when I went in, I was 15. And the way I did that was I needed to get a birth certificate. And I was sent down to get the birth certificate, and I found out, well, in those days, they had a big, thick ledger book, not so big, and somebody with fancy writing would write the information in. Well, I went down in 1944. Of course, there were a lot of people that were being drafted and enlisting and different things, and I don't think they really looked too hard, but anyway, they told me they didn't have my birth certificate. So I went back to the recruiter and told him that they didn't have it, and he said, that's all right, it happens all the time. And in those days it did. I mean, a lot of babies were born on kitchen tables because people couldn't afford to go to hospitals. And I mean, during the Depression, it was some hard times you wouldn't believe. And anyway, the deal was, a neighbor of mine told me that the Army was starting a new program, and they were taking people that were 17 and a half. And so I went down, and they asked me how old I was, and I told them 17 and a half. And I don't think I looked it, but I don't think I did today. But anyway, they took me, and while I was there, I saw a pamphlet of some kind. It said that if you put in for active duty, you might get it. So I put in for active duty since I was there, and I got it. So I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic training. When I got there, they cut back the length of basic training because of the fact that the powers that be in Europe said that they thought the war was going to be over by Christmas of that year. And so they said cut back on the training. You don't need as much or as severe stuff. So they cut it back, and when I graduated from basic training, they sent me out to Fort Ord, California, and there was a 788th Tank Battalion amphibious down there. And I didn't know anything about amphibious. I knew I didn't want to be in it because I saw one of they had what they called LVTs, landing vehicle tracked. And I watched one of them go into the water, and it went like this, and I said, I don't think I want to be in this thing. But thank God, when I did, they told me just put your bag down there, and they go down there and get in line for shots. So there was 6 guys, 2 rows of 6 guys giving shots in each arm as you went through. And they had such things as elephantitis and sleeping sickness. And I don't know what all they had. I had never heard of half of this stuff. So I figured I must be going to the Pacific to get all these crazy shots. I already had every shot in the name in mankind, I thought, from basic training, but they gave me some I hadn't heard of. So anyway, when I got through with the shots, they told me to go see Colonel somebody, which I did, and he told me not to bother unpacking. You're going to go on a trip. Oh, where am I going? You'll find out. That was the standard answer. So the next morning, I went down to the motor pool where they told me to go, and we had. Let me hang on just a minute. Let me get a picture of this. I should have had this over here before. Well, I've got a picture here of it. The LVT was an ugly-looking beast. About as ugly-looking beast as you can find. This is a normal one that they landed troops with, and this is the kind that we got a hold of. The 2 here, you'll notice they have guns on them instead of an open bay.
Wow. Yeah.
So we took those and put them on flatbed train cars and got in them, took them to Brooklyn Army base, Brooklyn, New York, from California. It made sense in those days, you know. If you're going to go to Europe and send you to the Pacific, if you're going to go to Europe, yeah, who knows. Anyway, we got to Brooklyn, and the train pulled up next to the ship, and the ship had their crane, and they came down and picked these things up, put them on ship. And away we went. We went to France, landed at Le Havre, and put them on French flatbed trains and took them to the town of Antwerp, Belgium. The reason we took them to Antwerp was the British had taken the town of Antwerp, but they did not secure the port. Boy, my glasses are dirty. And so we got there and turned these LVTs over to the British, and we left. The reason the port hadn't been opened was because there was a 82-mile estuary that went up to the North Sea called the Scheldt Estuary. You may have heard of it before. The Germans are on one side of it, the British were on the other, and so the British needed something to go across the water to take kick the Germans out of the rest of Holland. So we left them, and God bless them, they could have them all they wanted as far as I was concerned. So then they sent us, the guys that took them over, they sent us all to what they called the cigarette camps. I don't know whether you've ever heard of them or not. Anybody that went to Europe could tell you about the cigarette camps. There were 3 camps, and they were named for the different cigarette brands that were popular at that time. I don't think they're even in existence anymore. We had Lucky Strike, Old Gold, and Philip Morris. All 3 were brands of cigarettes. I went to Old Gold, and I stayed there for several days, and a 6x6 truck came up one day and picked up 4 or 5 of us and took us to our unit where we were going. And that was in the town of Neufchâteau, Belgium, which is right near Liège. But anyway, where I went was to the 740th Tank Battalion. And I went in as a replacement. Now the 740th had trained in Arizona. I'm going to go back a little bit, but the reason being you need to get a background on this unit. They trained in Arizona in the desert, and they trained as a CDL unit. Now CDL stands for Canal Defense Light. And Canal Defense Light was just a cover name for the whole thing. What it was they took first the Grant Lee tanks, M3 tanks, took the turret off and put on a separate turret. Then they did the same thing with the M4 Sherman tank. And what they had is in this turret, had no main gun. It's just round, about like this, and a circular thing. It had 2 slits in the front instead of a gun. And it had a light in between these 2 slits facing to the rear of the turret, where it hit a concave mirror and made it even brighter. It was a arc light type thing, like they used to use in movies. You remember they used to have the lights going over your head. Well, that's the kind of thing it was. And then there was an operator by these 2 slits, and he could, by adjusting the control on it, he could make the lights blink or go up sideways or whatever he wanted to do. The idea was, the British came up with this, and the idea was to blind the German anti-tank gunners so that they could walk across the desert at night with this light shining and infantry following them, and the light supposedly was going to blind the Germans. Well, the Germans, being as stupid as they were, they came up with something a heck of a lot smarter than we had at the time, and that was an infrared sight on their guns. And the infrared could see through the lights, so it didn't bother them a bit. So, as it turned out, all this training my unit did was for naught. But they didn't know that yet, so they were sent over to Europe, and they were trained some more doing the same thing in Wales and then later in England. And the stupid part of it was, finally somebody said, wait a minute. This isn't the desert. You're not going to be in desert country when you get to France. There's villages there, there's hills, and there's hedgerows and churches and cathedrals. It won't work there. So they said, oh yeah, that's right. Well, then they said, retrained everybody into a normal tank battalion, which they went through because of that goof, they missed the Normandy invasion. So anyway, as it happened, I got there to the unit in September of '44, and they had been there just a few weeks before me. And the reason I went there as a replacement is there was 4 or 5 guys in the unit that had gotten some kind of a disease or sickness, and I can't remember what the name of it was, but they had to go back to England. And the battalion commander had gotten it too. He was supposed to go into North Africa for the invasion there, but he couldn't because they sent him back to the desert, Arizona desert, to recoup. So anyway, there we were, stuck there, and when this unit went to Belgium, the battalion commander was told to go see the commanding general of the First Army. Well, first of all, they landed. He commandeered 2 LSTs to get the unit over to France. They said, okay, you can go, but you leave your tanks here. You'll get new tanks when you get to Europe. So the LSTs went into Utah Beach, and they asked the beach master, who was Navy, where their tanks were, and he said, I don't have any tanks. I don't know. I wouldn't know a tank if I hit it. So he said, I suggest you send somebody up to the First Army and find out where they want you. So that's what he did. The battalion commander sent his executive officer up to Spa, Belgium, where First Army headquarters was. And he reported in, and they said, what are you doing here? We didn't ask for you. We don't want you. We will need you. He said, well, we wanted to fight before the war ended. Well, actually, he wanted to fight. I don't think anybody else wanted to fight. I sure as heck didn't. I'm not that type of guy. I love peace. Anyway, he said that the Army commander told him, well, go on back to Neufchâteau and train and keep law and order in town, and if and when we want you, we'll let you know. So he went back to Neufchâteau, and one of the things that he did, he had our guys patrolling the town at night. They had a curfew on, I think it was about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, because nighttime starts very early there because they're up so high in the north. So one night, this is a story that I love to tell people because they enjoy it. One night, one particular guy was patrolling in his Jeep, and he's going down the road, and he saw this lady walking up the road, and he stopped, and he says, sorry, ma'am, you have to go back home. The curfew's on. And she says, no, I have to go to the hospital. He says, no, you have to go home. And she says, no, I have to go to the hospital. And of course, she was very pregnant. And so he said, hop in, and he took her to the hospital emergency room. Well, I'm on the way, she asked him what his name was. And now, with that, I'm going to stop, and I ask you to please remind me to tell you what happened with the lady.
Okay.
And so, finally, the Germans started shooting up December 16th, the start of the Battle of the Bulge. We could see the lights off in the distance and hear the rumble of the guns. But we didn't have anything to do yet. Nobody was concerned, apparently. Finally, on the 17th, the First Army was told, well, it looks like this is going to be a breakthrough of the Germans. So they told us to go down to this ordnance depot at a town named Spremont, Belgium, and take anything you want. So, oh boy, we thought, oh, there, we're going to get our new tanks. So everybody went down in the battalion. 800 guys went down there, about 800, went down to the ordnance depot, and everything there was junk. All the tanks had been shot up, had holes in them, radios were taken out, gun sights were taken, and so we pieced together 2 Sherman tanks by taking parts off of other ones. We still didn't have radios or gun sights. They were gone. And then 1 tank destroyer. You know the difference of a tank destroyer and a tank?
like the small ones with the big guns, right?
The tank destroyers had a bigger gun.
Yeah.
And that was about the only difference, except they didn't have any cover on the top of the turret, which was ridiculous in Europe especially. But anyway, we were stuck with it. So we were sent down to the Stoumont, Belgium, name of the town, Stoumont, and their train station was out of town. It was like maybe a mile out of town. And they told us to go down there because the 30th Infantry Division people were stuck in the ditches next to the road. And the 1st SS Panzer Division, Adolf Hitler, of all names, was coming toward them. And they had Panther tanks, which were smaller than the Tiger, but they had good guns on them and plenty of armor. So anyway, what happened was when we got there, we had these two tanks and a tank destroyer. We had an M8 armored car, which is useless. It had a 37 millimeter gun on it. So, and the other things we had were jeeps and trucks and stuff that you didn't need for fighting tanks. Why they even bothered went, I don't know. But anyway, they sent us all down there. So the first tank was about to enter the area where the train station was, but there was a big sweeping curve that went down there. And so you see pictures in the news, the old news, and you see these tanks just going like the devil. And you think, oh, they're going to the front. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. They were way back in the back somewhere going toward the front. They weren't on the front because you can't see very well out of a tank. If you close everything up, you can't see anything because you're looking through a periscope like this. And if you turn your head, you can do it that way, but what's going on over here while you're looking over there? So we just didn't button up until we really had to. We call it button up by closing the hatches. The reason being is you just couldn't see. When you're in a tank, just like if you're an infantryman, your eyes are going all directions looking for what's out there, what's going to shoot me. And if you don't do that, you find out real quick you're dead or else you're wounded. And so this first tank came around this slow curve, and as soon as he got around the corner, he saw the first German tank. He fired and knocked it out. He went to reload the gun, and he couldn't. He got stuck in the breach. So remember, no radios, so he had to wait for the second tank to come up. He came around slow, and just as he got around the corner, he saw the second tank, German tank. He knocked him out. The third one was the tank destroyer. He came around the corner, and I want to tell you, we had gunners that you wouldn't believe. Everybody was amazed at the gunners in our unit because they had been trained so much. They were so good that if they lost a gunner, they really felt terrible about it. Not only the loss of a man, but our gunners were so good. The infantry always told us that if you could point to something, we could hit it. And that's what happened when that tank destroyer came around. They fired 3 times and knocked out the third tank. I've got a picture of what it looked like at the end, which I'll try to find it here before I go on. But anyway, that was proved that in the first half hour of combat, we had not stopped the SS Panzer Division, which was quite a trick. And I don't know if any other unit can say they did that in a half hour time. But what happened was the 1st SS Panzer, then they retreated, but then they came back and came into the town of Stoumont in a different direction. This is what it looked like when they got finished. A Belgian had sat at the train station and saw it and drew that picture.
Wow.
And the funny part of it was I found a guy in Sweden that had studied this same picture. Where he got it, I don't know. But he studied it and he found out that exactly what happened with each one of these tanks, and had information on it, where it came from and everything about it. It was very interesting reading it, because of course we had a vested interest in it. I'm going to give you a picture of that. That will help you a lot if you're going to do any research, or if you're interested in reading about this stuff. So anyway, after this, stopping the 1st SS Panzer Division, the Germans retreated, and they came around and came in to the Stuma, the town of Stuma. Now, before they even started this thing, and before we got down to the train station, the 1st SS Panzer Division stopped. Well, have you ever heard of the Malmedy massacre?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Malmedy is a town down below on a hill. Up on the hill is where the massacre occurred, at a town by the name of Beauvais, not Malmedy. Today, the town of Beauvais, well, the village of Beauvais, is now part of Malmedy. I was surprised to find that out, because I've been over there many times. Never happened until this last time I went over. But anyway, they had caught part of an American convoy on the road, and they captured them, put them in the field, and made them raise their arms up, and fired them, killed them all. Well, they tried to kill all of them. There were a few guys that fell down and played dead, and many of them that fell down, they came through and put a gun to their head, made sure they were dead. I met one of the guys, and he told me what he did. He said when they started shooting, he just dropped into a ditch. He was standing right next to it. So he just dropped into that. And he said it was full of ice coating. It was very cold water. And he said he laid there until they left. He said it might have been 10 minutes, but he said it sure felt like 10 years to him. And he even saw this one guy come over with a pistol in his hand, and he thought he was going to get shot, but the guy looked at him, and I guess he figured he's dead already, so he didn't shoot him. And there were about 10 guys, I understand, something like that escaped without being killed. But when the word about the Malmedy massacre occurred, when the word was received at 1st Army headquarters, they sent the message out to everybody in 1st Army, 3rd Army, 7th and 9th. SS is shooting American prisoners. Do what you think is right. Well, what we all thought was right was we don't take SS prisoners. SS was a lousy bunch of guys. I can't even describe them without using some words if I should. And the other day I made this same talk to a group. There was 2 nice old ladies there, and I just went ahead and said the words I wanted to say, because the SS was so nasty. Well, they ran the concentration camps, and they would, going down the road in the convoy, the Germans, if they came into a town and a bunch of Belgians were standing there watching them go through, just for fun, I guess, they would pull out a gun and shoot these people right there on the street. No reason at all. Plus, they killed the American prisoners. So we just, from then on, SS man was dead as far as we were concerned. And that was the way it had to be. Because if you didn't kill them, they would kill you. They had the opportunity. So anyway, getting back to the 1st SS Panzer Division, they made a big circle and came into the town of Stuma again. They had an infantry fight at a house there, which is still there. It's called the Brown House. The reason they call it that is the top of it is white, but the bottom half of it is a brown color. It's still painted that color, and it's still there. And just about across the street and down a ways, there's an old hospital up on a hill. And that was where the next problem was for us. There was this long hospital was up on this hill, and at the end of the building, the Germans had a Panther tank sitting there, and then in front of the building, right at the main entrance, they had what the Germans called a whirlwind. I don't know whether you know what that is or not, but what it was the Mark IV chassis, and they had a turret on it with 4 machine guns like that, pointing two directions, and they could turn that turret around as for shooting down airplanes. So anyway, we knocked that whirlwind down without any problem, but the Panther, we couldn't get a good shot at it because we were low and he was sitting up here and we couldn't get a good shot up there. So what happened was, during the night, our C company built a corduroy road. You know what a corduroy road is? Most people don't today, I don't know why. But the corduroy road is you take anything that you can put down on the ground so that you can get traction. So what you got is this kind of traction. Now if you're in a car, you're going to go over this thing, it's going to be bumpy, but you can get traction. A tank, of course, runs over the top of it with a track. And that's how you got traction to get up the hill. And you just cut down trees and made them wide enough for the tracks to fit on. And that was what they call a corduroy road, because it's like corduroy pants. You got corduroy with little bumps all across it, you know. So that's what we did. And we got finished just right at 6 o'clock in the morning. And apparently the Germans were sleeping in their tank, because when we got up there right at 6 o'clock, we immediately fired and knocked the tank out. And the crew just bailed out and took off. They didn't even wait. So then we owned the hill and the hospital. And what happened was that Panther, there were a lot of infantrymen stuck in the hospital at each room. And every time they tried to break out, well, this Panther would put a round right down through the hallway. And that changes your mind real quick. So we freed them. They went back to their units. And then we found in the basement there were 92 old folks and kids, little kids. And they're being held there and trying to keep quiet by this Catholic priest. And that poor devil, he must have had one hard time trying to. Can you imagine keeping that many kids and old folks quiet? Well, if they hadn't, they would have been killed, because the Germans would have come down there and killed them, you know, right there in that basement. And that hospital is still there, by the way. So anyway, the next town was the town of L'église. And up to this time, we had been with the 30th Infantry Division. Well, about the time we got that hospital cleared, our battalion command post was in a chateau back by Stewmont. And in the assault gun platoon, which is what I was in at the time, it was a standard Sherman tank with a 105 instead of a 75 or 76. I've got a model of one over there I can show you. And the standard tank was a 75 or 76 millimeter gun on the main gun. But we had six guns that were assault guns, and we lined them up in back of the chateau. And our battalion commander saw a Long Tom 155 howitzer bugging out. He was heading through the rear. And so the colonel sent his driver down and stopped him. He says, Lieutenant Colonel up there says you guys bring that gun up there where he is. And the guy said, no, we got to get out of here. We're getting out of here. And they said, no, you're not getting out of here, because he told me that he would shoot at you and knock you out if you didn't. So he said, yes, sir, we'll go up. So they came up, they set up, so we had 6 105s and this 155 sitting there, and the colonel got up on the veranda of the chateau, and he's got his binoculars up, and he's getting the range for the guns, and he'd call out the figures for them, and they would shoot at what he was talking about. And from this chateau, you could see the chapel in the town. And I'll tell you about that chapel in a little bit. But that was a good point, because he knew he didn't want to knock out the chapel in this town if he's going to have good relations with the people in town. He didn't want to ruin their church, because they were very religious people. So anyway, they demolished the town. The town of L'église was really shot up. This was about the time of Christmas. And so the Germans, SS Panzer had taken the town of Leglaise, and they were in town, and we shot them up so bad that they knocked out all their equipment with all that firepower shooting into this town. We knocked out their equipment. What they could, they took with them and left. And it was right about Christmas, and the 82nd Airborne had come up, and the reason they had come up was 82nd and the 101st had been up in Holland on the Market Garden. I guess you know about that, don't you? Okay, well, they had been sent to France to re-equip, and they were still down there when they needed them for the balls, and so they sent them up on trucks. And some of those guys got there, and they had nothing more than a shirt and pants on. Some didn't have a helmet, some didn't have weapons. They had not yet received new ones since the battle in Holland. And it was cold. I mean, it was not just cold, it was very cold. And how they survived, I don't know. But the 101st went to Bastogne, and the 82nd came up to where we were in the North Shoulder. And I want to clarify one thing. A lot of people talk about the Bulge, and they talk about the 101st at Bastogne. Bastogne was just one small battle, believe me. This one very small battle compared to what else was going on. But they had good PR, and so they get a lot of attention, which I don't understand why. But anyway, what happened was we were assigned to the 82nd Airborne about the time of Christmas. They had just come up, and so our colonel, battalion commander, went to report in to the 82nd, and the 82nd Airborne said, well, he says, you know, we haven't had too much luck with tank battalions. He says, they could never keep up with us. And our colonel said, well, we were hoping that you guys would be able to keep up with us, because we don't like to mess around, we like to move. And he said, I think we'll get along okay. Well, at the end of the war, we got a letter from the 82nd Airborne commanding general, and he told us that we were one of the best tank battalions they'd ever worked with. And they had been in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and Normandy, and all the way across France and Belgium. So I think that was a pretty good thing that happened. So after L'Église, and I told you at L'Église about the chapel. You remember the story about the Monument Men? Mm-hmm. You saw a movie and you might have read the book about it. Well, there was what they called a Madonna in this chapel, and it stood about as high as this, really, and it was carved wood. Beautiful job of carving, but it had been there for centuries. They didn't even know how old it was, but they knew it was centuries old. And so during the German occupation, they took this thing, the townspeople, and they hid it somewhere in somebody's basement, and the Germans never did get that one. But if they had, they would have taken it back to Germany. And so they were very proud of that. It made it through the war without being taken by the Germans. The Germans took everything that they wanted. I mean, if they wanted that lamp, they'd take it. I mean, that's how ridiculous it was. And they would send stuff back on trains instead of using it to bring up supplies for the German troops. So we thought it was pretty great that they used it that way, but then they also used it for taking bodies back to the concentration camps, which was really ridiculous. So we were with the 82nd Airborne and had a very difficult fight between L'Église and the Siegfried line. Siegfried, well, first of all, you got the Maginot Line, which was built by the French and Belgians in 1936. And it took them 6 years to build it, and it took the Germans a half hour to destroy it. And so the Belgians were pretty disgusted with that. They spent a lot of money, tax money on it, and it lasted for 1.5 hours. And it was all underground with turrets stuck up out of the ground that they could pop them up or down. If they saw somebody coming that they didn't want to, like they thought the Germans might invade them, like they did in the First World War, they could bring these turrets up and then they could turn them and shoot at the Germans. Well, the Germans just landed on the Maginot Line, with gliders, and they got out of the gliders, went over and put a hand grenade in the gun, knocked it out. National line was useless. I mean, they did it all on the line where there was guns there. So then they were able to get into the place and blow the doors off so they could walk in, and they just destroyed the whole thing, the whole national line. So that left nothing but the Siegfried line on the German border. And I'm sure you've seen what they call dragon's teeth sticking up out of the ground, concrete, reinforced concrete. They look like teeth, like if you know, not really, but dragon's teeth, yeah. I've never seen a dragon, so who knows. But anyway, they were concrete, and the Germans built those, and they thought they would stop French tanks from going into Germany. Well, it didn't stop us because we either pushed dirt over them and just rode over the top of them on the other side, or we blew them out of the way and drove through. And beyond these dragon's teeth, for about 2 miles in, there was, they had what they called it, bunkers, and the bunkers were 3 feet to 8 feet thick of reinforced concrete with nothing but a brazier in front, a hole so that they could stick the gun barrel out to shoot at whoever was trying to invade them. Well, they were pretty tough to get past because you had a bunker here, and then you had another bunker here defending that one, and another one over here defending that one, and then these two outriggers had them the same thing, and kept doing it all the way for about 2 miles. So the infantry had to do a lot of fighting there, and they had to try to get up and knock out those guns if they could. If they couldn't, we would try to bring up one of our assault guns and hopefully try to put a round into the braziers. And so we got them. It worked on a lot of them, but a lot of them we couldn't get around into them because of the position we were in. And the infantry would even use hand grenades and throw them in the braziers, and sometimes they put them in the stovepipe coming from the inside. And why they had a stovepipe there. Another thing we couldn't figure out, I thought that was kind of stupid, because that's perfect for dropping a hand grenade in it and blowing up the stove inside, and all that stove blowing across everybody and blowing parts of the stove. So it would knock out a bunker real fast. Well, that's what we faced, and it took quite a while to get across it. And the 82nd Airborne told us that it was the roughest fight they had ever been in. So we believed it. It was tough. So we finally got into that, and then we were ordered to go to the town of Düren and take it from the Germans. Well, Düren sits right on a river called the Ruhr, R-O-E-R. And you gotta watch out because there's 2 rivers that sound like the same. There's the Ruhr, R-U-H-R, that's over around Dusseldorf, and the R-O-E-R, which is pronounced as Ruhr as well. It was right along the Hürtgen Forest that you've heard of, and the town of Düren. Düren was right on the edge of the Hürtgen Forest. Now the Germans had, before they retreated to the town of Düren, there was a dam up the river, and they turned all the water on, and then they blew up the works so that you couldn't turn it off. So it flooded this whole valley, and it was 2 miles wide, and we couldn't get across with our tanks. The infantry couldn't get across, so we had to wait about 2 weeks before we could get across there. Meanwhile, we were shooting artillery rounds over into the town of Düren just continuously, and then they were shooting back at us. But what we would do is what they call shoot and scoot. We'd be here, we'd shoot, and then we'd move and shoot again, and move another direction and shoot again. But they would move all of our stuff, six assault guns with 105s. We tore up the town, and then our Air Force came in and flattened the town. And when we finally got for the water to go down so that they could put a bridge across, we got into the town. first thing I remember seeing, and I don't know why this stuck in my mind, but there was a statue there of a German general from World War I. I don't remember what his name was, but he was pointing like this, his hand down like that. And originally, he had that finger pointing to the west. Well, after all that bombing, strafing and everything, that statue had actually rotated around. Now he's pointing east, which was the direction we were going. So we thought that was very nice, but I can remember saying, I wonder how long it will be before some GI has to shoot that finger off. I forgot about it. But about 50 or 60 years later, I picked up a book somewhere, and there was a picture of that statue there. And I thought, my God, that thing is still there. And now this picture was taken, and there he is. He's got his left hand down here. His arm is stuck out like that. The arm's gone. They shot the whole arm off. And I thought that was, well, that's the kind of humor you get in wartime. I mean, it's destruction, but it was funny to us, and we just got a big kick out of it. But anyway, the town was flat, and we took it, and that was the beginning of the Cologne Plain. And I've got a map here showing you the Cologne Plain from Düren to Cologne. And we were there with the 8th Infantry Division, and we were on the south side of the troops going in. And there was a bunch of little towns along the way. If you go there today, you wonder how on earth we did it, but there's a main drag going from Düren into Cologne, and on that main road, there's town after town after town with just, well, at that time, just a little bit of grass in between. Now, I haven't been there for a long time, but I bet most of those towns have joined in with the Cologne megalopolis, because Cologne was a big town to start with, but these little towns, I'm sure, the way things have developed over in Germany, they've really made some real progress. But these little towns gave us more problems because they were just in the way. We were trying to get to Cologne. We finally got there and took Cologne, and we, like I say, we were on the south side. And oh, by the way, have you ever been over to Europe? Have you? Did you ever go to Cologne?
No, I have not.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is because I've got a box here that I got years ago, and that's the cathedral at Cologne. And the Germans were smart. They took out all the glass windows, which were real pretty stuff, and they hid it. And the stupidest part about the whole thing, this thing was built centuries ago. But when they were putting the train station in, they put it right next door to it. You come out of the train station and you go up about 5 steps, and you're right at the front entrance of this cathedral. So during the war, the Air Force was told not to hit that cathedral. So they didn't. They never did hit it. And after the war, the Germans just pulled the glass out and put it back up. So we'd taken Cologne, so now they had to find us something else for us to do. So they told us to go back to the town of Aachen, Germany, Aachen, get on flatbed train cars and make a big turn into France and come back in down by Saarbrücken, Germany. Saarbrücken is right on the border of Germany and France. Well, we were supposed to take the 90th Infantry Division across the Siegfried Line again. We thought, oh God, it was terrible. So, well, the 90th had already made it across, so they said, we'll go to the next division south, which was the 63rd Division. And by the way, the singer, I Left My Heart in San Francisco, you know who I'm talking about? And anyway, he was in the 63rd Division. And so we took them across the Siegfried Line, another heck of a battle. And then after that, we took a town called Hamburg, Homburg. not Hamburg, but Hamburg, H-O-M. And we took that town, and then they said, okay, go on back up to the First Army. We were with the 7th at that time. So we went back up to the First Army, and we went up the road going up the Rhine River to the north, went to Bonn, which later became the German capital during the occupation. And we crossed the Rhine River, went up to what they called the Ruhr Pocket. The Ruhr Pocket battles. I guess you know what that was. We started out in a town just across the river from Cologne, and all the units that they had available, they made a big sweeping curve like this. And we ended up in Dusseldorf, and I don't know where the rest of them went, but they captured thousands of German prisoners there. And one German general, he committed suicide because of the whole thing. He lost his whole army, and he did that out in the jungle, in the forest somewhere there. So we stayed in Dusseldorf for about 2 weeks, and we finally got to do some maintenance on our tanks and ourselves. We hadn't had showers since we started, and we were getting to be a little ripe. So they let us take showers. We took a hotel there, and the hotel is still there. And now it's a chain like Sheridan or something. They bought them. So then we were there 2 weeks, and they said, well, we got orders to go like the devil and go up to the town of Blakita, right on the Elbe River. The Elbe River was the dividing line between the Allies and the Russians. I'm talking about the Russians were allies too, but not near as good as they could have been. So we had to cross the Elbe River to go north. So we did. We went north. We were back with the 82nd Airborne again, and we came to the town of Ludwigslust, and went in there. And right next to the town of Ludwigslust, there was a town called Wobelen, and Wobelen had a concentration camp there, and it was a small camp, but part of a big group of concentration camps, and they were not pretty things to see. They were real bad, and even it took years for me to get over seeing those things. I can remember having dreams about it and waking up and smelling the dead people and smelling what those places smelled like. I tell this to kids sometimes, and they say, well, what did it smell like? The only way I can describe it is think of everything that you can't stand the smell of, and that's not even close to it. Put them all together, it's not even close to it. So that's the best way I could describe it, because it was terrible. And, you know, bodies around in all form of life and death, mostly death. So anyway, from there we went on up to, kept going north. We went by a couple of German airfields, and became practice with our gunners to see if they could knock airplanes out while they're taking off. They let them get up off the ground, then they'd hit them with a pretty good sized shell that would knock them out of the air. And that went on every time we passed an airfield, which was just twice, thank guys. But anyway, that was how we amused ourselves, knocking down airplanes. And then there was a new man that had just come in as a replacement to the battalion, and he was a tank commander. So he radioed back to the battalion commander, and he says, Colonel, he says, who's supposed to be spearheading this drive? The spearheading is leading it, in other words. And the colonel said, well, you are, why? He said, well, I thought so too. He says, but I'm going like the devil up the road here, and the infantrymen are passing me up on horses and mules and old cars, bicycles, motorcycles. And his colonel said, oh, that's that crazy 82nd Airborne. He says, they'll do anything. And that was the truth. They were the most fun-loving guys I ever saw in my life. They were just a bunch of real great guys. And I'm proud as the devil to be even associated with them, because they're great. And even today, they're the same kind of guys. It's just like they were cut from the same cloth. It's amazing. So we were driving north. We were sent up there by headquarters of the First Army to assist the British. We couldn't figure out why the British needed assistance. So we went up and we met the British up on the Baltic Sea in a town called Schwerin, and that's where the war ended. Many years later, I found out the reason that we were sent up there was because they wanted to have a show of force to the Russians, that the Americans and the British were together on this, and it was to block the Russians from taking Denmark. And we didn't know that at the time, but we were glad we did it. And so we ended the war there, and you know, we had several ceremonies and things like that, medals given out, and chaplains had their prayers to say, and we stayed there for about 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and then we went down south to our occupation zone. And we were ended up in the town of Limburg on the Lahn River, just north of Frankfurt, about 30 miles, something like that. It was kind of a bedroom community for Frankfurt. And we had our companies all strung across there, all the way over to Rudesheim on the Rhine River. And by this time I was in communications, and I had a friend in our company D, which was in Rudesheim, and they had to check houses, German homes all the time for loot and you know, art that's been stolen by the Germans, and if they saw any booze, they took that too. And I ended up with champagne and all kinds of cognac and all this good stuff. And he'd set it down to the message center in a big black suitcase. And when I got it, I'd make sure nobody was around. I'd take it out and put it in my Jeep, and I'd take it up to where we were living. And instead of going to the club that we set up, I'd just stay home and take a magnum of champagne and sit there and drink it down and go to sleep. It was very nice. We had a nice club there, and we had an Indian guy that was in the outfit that was just a character. But I wanted to tell you about this lady. We put up a monument in 92, I think it was. And I had designed the monument, and well, and there's a picture of it there up on top.
On the left?
Yeah.
Okay.
I designed it and put the words on it. You might want to read it if you'd be interested in it. And so we went over, I had to go over and give them the plan for it, and then when they built it, well, I had to go over and pay them for it. And so I had money. This was before they checked your bags, you know, on getting on airplanes. And I had money in every pocket in that suit. $100 bills, stacks of them, you know. I don't remember what it cost us, but I had all this in my pockets, and I thought, boy, if I get caught with this, they're going to think I'm dealing in drugs or something. So I went there to pay it for it, and the lady said, I won't charge you Belgian tax if you don't tell anybody that we did. And I just went like that. She's
Wait, so what town was this in? The memorial?
that town that's, now I have to back up. So many towns over there. I'll think of it in a minute. Neufchâteau, Belgium, near Liège. There's 2 Neufchâteaus in Belgium. One's down by Bastogne and the other's by Liège. And then there's one in France. So anyway, the guy picked up the lady and took her to the hospital. Well, we went over to put the monument up in 92, and we had a big ceremony there. The town all came out. I mean, we had a crowd. We had representatives from the King of Belgium there, and they had the American ambassador to Belgium was there, and all kinds of bigwigs. And I was the master of ceremonies because I was a secretary for our reunion groups at that time. And so this lady, after the program was over, this lady came up to me and she says, excuse me, she says, Mr. I don't remember what the guy's name was. Let's say it's John Doe. is Mr. Doe there? Was he here today? And I said, yeah, he's here. And she says, I wonder if I could talk to him. I said, sure. You just wait there and I'll go get him. So the townsfolk were feeding us about that time. So I found him and I said, hey, there's a lady out here that wants to talk to you. And he said, a lady? I don't know any ladies. I said, well, I don't know what kind of women you know. I said, there's a lady out there. And he said, well, I don't. I said, it's a Belgium lady. And he said, well, I don't know any Belgium ladies. I said, well, she knows you because she knows you by name. So he went out and he still didn't know what was going on. The woman introduced herself and she had this guy standing next to her, about a 50-year-old guy or whatever it was. And she said, and this was John Doe Schmidt or whatever the Belgian name was. Same name as this guy. She had named her son after this guy because he was born that night. And when she left, I walked back to the group with this guy. And I told him, I said, you know, you're probably the luckiest guy in the world. And he says, why is that? I said, do you know what would have happened if your wife had been with you on this trip? Wouldn't he had a mess? I'm telling you. Oh, a lot of funny things happen too, you know, it's just amazing. So anyway, I stayed there in Europe until 1948. And 1948, July, I went back to the States and re-enlisted and went asked for occupation duty in Japan. So I went to Japan. I got there in November, December 48. And when I got there, everybody that went there had to be briefed about what to expect and what not to do and all this kind of stuff. Made us mad because MacArthur was always so afraid that we were going to embarrass the American government if we said or did the wrong thing. Made us mad because, you know, he acted like we were a bunch of 2-year-old kids. So anyway, I was sitting there listening to this and somebody called out my name, told me to go see this guy, and I went back to see him. And I was supposed to go to the 1st Cavalry Division in Japan. They called me and he asked me, he says, would you rather go to the Far East headquarters, Far East Command headquarters? And I thought, no more digging holes, no more eating out of a can, you're not sure what's in it, no sheets. And I said, yeah, I'll take it. And so I said, okay. So they gave me my orders and I went into Tokyo and reported to the Far East Command headquarters. And they told me they were glad to have me and that they wanted me to be the crew chief or the, what they call it, the alert crew. I said, well, yeah, it sounds good. What is a crew chief or alert crew? And he said, well, I said, you'll be in charge of all the communications setup. You take it to, when General MacArthur wants to go somewhere, you have to just take communications equipment, set up communications between him and Tokyo so that he could get instant talk back and forth to Tokyo or the U.S. So I thought, yeah, that sounds okay. So I started for the door and he said, oh, by the way, and I thought, uh-oh, the shoe's got to drop now, the second shoe. I said, what's that? And he says, well, it says you have to take training for gliders because we want you may have to go in a glider. So I changed the whole thing. That was not too good. But I said, well, okay. So sure enough, they sent me off to the 11th Airborne to learn gliders and crewing, putting all of our equipment on the glider so that we could take it in. And as it happened, the day we finished, we had to take 3 rides in the glider to be qualified. And I got my wings. There's a pair of them up there. And they came out and they said, well, we've got some good news for you. The Army has just declared gliders obsolete and you'll never have to worry about riding a glider again. And I went, oh, thank God. But they were horrible. Every landing was a controlled crash, or It's what they called a controlled crash. It was more like a crash, period. It was uncontrolled, but you just never knew. And so we never had to worry about gliders again. And you know, there was a saying about a trip in a glider was like a person that had a lifetime of constipation that was instantly cured. And boy, I can tell you, I believe it, because it was scary as a devil riding in those things. So anyway, we had to load up airplanes, DC-4s they call them, C-54s they call them, and they were 4-engine airplane. We could put all of our equipment in there, and then when the Korean War started in 1950, MacArthur was going in and out of Korea quite often, and we always had to go in and set them up. And we had tents that we could fold up and tear down. And every time he went in, we'd go ahead of him, and then when he'd leave, well, we'd tear it all down and take it back to Tokyo. So I stayed in, and well, I went home about 1951 and 52, something like that. When MacArthur was fired, that's when I left too. And of course, he went back on an airplane, and I went back on a banana boat. Pretty horrible things to ride in by themselves, because they had a lot of bunks, you know, stacked up, about that much room in between each one. So I stayed in and went down, let's see, I went from there, I came back to the States and went right to Germany in a unit that I didn't like, and I wanted to get out of it, so I volunteered to go back to Korean infantry or armor, and they couldn't let me go because of my security clearances. So I tried volunteering several times. They wouldn't let me go, so I told them, well, if you don't let me go, I'm going to get out of the Army altogether, because I'm not staying in this outfit. And they said, well, we're sorry, we can't do it. It's against the law. So I went back to the States. I got out. I went over to the Air Force recruiter, put my hand up, and I says, here I am, can you use me? And they said, what'd you do in the Army? I told them, they said, we'll take you. I said, great. And I said, let's talk rank now. And he says, we'll get, what rank were you in the Army? I told him, tech sergeant, which was, now it's called something else. I don't know what they call it now, but it was 3 stripes up and 2 underneath, whatever that is.
Sergeant first class, I think.
Yeah, that's something like that. And so anyway, they took me and gave me my same rank, or same rank and everything. The only thing I lost was a couple of years' time and grade. So I went into that. My first assignment was up at Stewart Field in New York, and from there I went for a year up in Alaska, and then I came back from Alaska and went back to Germany again. And then I came back from Germany and went into Strategic Air Command, SAC, which was in Omaha. And then the Vietnam War started, and I had to go over to Vietnam for some special assignments. And thank God I didn't have to stay there, but when I was there, it was long enough. It was the stupidest war we ever got involved in. But anyway, we made it, and that's what counts, I guess. 90 days after I retired, I get a phone call. This is the draft board calling. If you don't come down here, I'm going to send the police for you. And I said, wait a minute, I just retired from the military. I can't help it. You gotta come down here and sign up, or I'm calling the police to come and get you. So I went down, walked in, the lady in charge. I said, ma'am, I think you made a mistake. I didn't make any mistake. You did not register for the draft before. Well, that's true. You know, I was in the Army, and I didn't have to register until you were 18. By that time, I was in the Army. I went through World War II, stayed in, didn't register for the draft for Korea. Stayed in, didn't register for the draft for Vietnam. Then I got thinking, well, maybe that's the reason. Well, why did it take them 22 years to find me? I mean, that is plain stupid. They had to come to my home, in my hometown, to check on me every time they gave me a clearance. And if I was good enough to get the clearance, but the kind of clearance I was doing was very top secret stuff. And I thought it was so stupid that they wouldn't know where I was at by that time. So then I had to carry around a draft card, a reserve card, and an active duty retiree card. So if they had to call me for another war, which one would they make me take? I've always wondered about that. So anyway, that was the end of that, and that was the end of my career. And then after that, of course, I was civilian. I was a private investigator for about 8 years. I worked in a hospital and security and safety. I was in charge of security and safety in a hospital in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then I went to Fort Worth, Texas. My wife died, and then I remarried after that, and that's this one here. And she died. In between there, I retired from University of Texas at Arlington. And then when I got out, I took lessons to play drums and got a job. The day I finished my lessons, I got a job in a big band, and boy, I really enjoyed doing that. And then, of course, I met my wife, and we were married, and found out she was a singer, and had a great time. Well, we had more fun. When we weren't playing music, we were dancing. And she was a good dancer, a great singer, and I just miss her something terrible. Just something terrible. When she died, I thought, well, if I don't come to this place here, I'll starve to death, because I'm not a cook. So I came here, and I'm starving to death anyway. Food's not that great. Certainly isn't like she fixed. But that was the story, the whole story. I don't know if there's anything specific you want to know about.
When you grew up, where was that? Was that
Columbus, Ohio.
Okay. What do you remember, like Pearl Harbor, when that happened? Or?
Yeah. I was sleeping, and my dad woke me up, and he said, "Wake up, wake up." I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "Japanese just bombed Pearl Harbor." I said, "Where the heck is Pearl Harbor?" He said, "I don't know, it's somewhere in Hawaii, I think." We didn't really know where it was. All I said was Oahu, and we didn't know where Oahu was in those days. Nobody ever went to Hawaii, no friends. During the Depression, nobody had money, you know. You couldn't take a trip to Hawaii.
Oh, what was that?
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember basic training. It's terrible. Actually, I enjoyed it because I ate meals I never knew existed when I was in basic training. I didn't know anybody ate like that. And I was so happy not to be eating out of a can, so I go overseas and they hand me a can again. So at least I knew how to handle a can of food, but most of the people hated them. I didn't like them because after a while you got used to it. There was only two or three kind of things you could get, and that got old fast. The average German soldier was, you know, just like we were. They were draftees, and most of our people were too. And as long as they weren't SS, as far as SS went, I still hate them. I really do. I hate them. I took my wife to Europe one time, well, several times, but the first time we went to Europe and we got a German rail pass, and she wanted to go to Salzburg, Austria, so I said, let me check, see if our pass is good. So I went to the information booth. I walked in, and this guy's sitting there with his feet up on the desk and reading the paper. I had to clear my throat to get his attention. And he said, "Oh, yes, sir, may I help you?" And I said, "I hope so." I said, "I've got a German rail pass. I'd like to go to Salzburg, Austria, and back, and I wonder if the German rail pass is good." And he goes like this. "Germany is Germany, and Austria is Austria." And I could just see SS pins on his shoulder. I could just see them. I was mad. I said, God damn it. I said, I didn't come in here for a lesson in geography. I came in here to get information. Now, are you going to give it to me or not? That's the only way you can talk to them. Yeah. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, you can use it. That's no problem. I said, would it have been easier to say that to start with than to get me all riled up? And, well, yeah, I don't know. Hell with it. It's a lot of laughter. But that's how it stuck with me. You'd meet somebody that you just knew they had been SS because of their attitude. They were a bunch of smart alecks to start with. And if you didn't yell at them, they didn't take heed. You know, they were so used to it when they were in the SS. Everybody yelling at them. Everything was a command. You know.
Were you promoted?
Excuse the language, by the way.
Oh no, it's fine.
I got fired up.
No, it's fine. Did you ever get promoted by rank during World War II, or would you say the same rank during the?
No, I went in as a private, and I ended up as a PFC, one stripe.
Do you have any messages for future generations, or?
Yeah, I'll tell you the same thing I tell all the kids I talk to. I tell them to stay in, get an education. Don't be stupid like I was, and lie about your age to get in the service. I don't think you can do it nowadays because these birth certificates are pretty hard to crack now. So you just get your education, then worry about what you're going to do or work toward you'll want to get involved in. But education is the most important thing. Stay in a school until you can't go any further. And I tell them all the same thing. Don't be foolish like I was. But things were different when I was growing up. Of course, we had this depression, and we had nothing. I mean, I can't even describe the living conditions that we had to live under, and it was something that I wanted to get out of, and I was sick and tired of fighting it, and I thought I always wanted to be a soldier, and from the time I was just a little tot, and I finally got my chance and I grabbed it, and I've never been sorry. Don't get me wrong, I've never been sorry that I did what I did, but I'll give you an example. Later on, after I retired, I wanted to go over, to take my wife over to several places I was at in Europe, and went to get a transfer. What do you call them?
Oh, passport?
Passport, there you go, thank you. And they said, well, you have to have a birth certificate. I said, well, they don't have one for me. He says, well, you have to have it. And I said, why? He says, well, because it's our policy. There's no reason for it, it's just our policy. I said, well, you so-and-sos, you sent me all over the world without a passport, and now I need one. And he said, I know, that's the way it goes. I'm sorry, but that's the rule. So I went back to get my passport, or my birth certificate. Well, now it's on computer. Believe this or not. So I told them I needed a birth certificate so I could get a passport. So they turned on their computer and voted just like that. Up came my birth certificate, which they gave me. I didn't know that it was my birth certificate or not, but they gave it to me. It listed my mother, my father, where I was born and when, but up at the top for my name, nothing there. So do I have a birth certificate or not? I don't know. But they took it. They accepted it for my passport. So I don't know. Yeah, a lot of strange things happen when you're dealing with the government. I mean, many strange things. This place here is a good example of it.
So what made you want to be a soldier when you were little?
Well, I think what made me want to do that is because when I was a kid, we had a lot of parades in town. For every national holiday, we had parades, plus they had other parades for other things. Anything to keep people some kind of happy, you know. Everybody was so miserable during the Depression. And so I would see these Civil War veterans marching. Some were still alive in the 30s. And my grandfather was in the Civil War. He was in the Pennsylvania Regiment. And he was at Appomattox when the peace was signed, as a matter of fact. And I had a great that was in the Revolutionary War. So I just wanted to be among them. And we had a small army post in my hometown, and they would always send a contingent out to be in a parade too. And I'd watch them and I'd think, oh boy, I'd love to be with them. Why, I don't know. Most kids would either want to be policemen or firemen or cowboys or something. Not me, I wanted to be a soldier. So I was happy about it. Therefore, I had no complaints. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Okay.
I don't think there's too many people that you know that can say that they've been completely happy with their life. I mean, I had the same problems other people have had. I mean, I've lost all my siblings. They've all died. And all the guys I was in service with, there's only 4 of us left. And I'm the youngest one. The other 3 guys are 98, 99, I think 97. So, I'm doing pretty good. Every job that I strive to do, I completed it when I was trying to accomplish. So I'm perfectly happy with my life. And I thought I wouldn't live beyond 91. Why 91? I don't know. But I just thought 91 would be the day I would go. And here I am, 94, and still kicking. But, when you get in your 90s, you're living on borrowed time, because it doesn't take long for you to realize all your people are gone and all your friends. And every time you meet somebody that you knew before, so-and-so died, and when? Oh my God. Just like here the other day when I came back from Pennsylvania, we put pictures up of people when they die, and there's a guy there that I used to see at the meals all the time, and he had died. He was 1 year younger than me, and he's gone now. And I see so many people that are younger than me that die, and it just gets to you. You figure somewhere along the line you did something right, but why? I've said this many times. Why me? Why am I still here? And so many of you guys are gone. But like we had a little over 800 people in my Tank Battalion, and they're all gone now, but the 4 of us. It just doesn't seem possible. Every day I say, why? Why me? Why did I get picked to stay this long, and so many others didn't? And I don't know what the answer is. People ask me that all the time. What are you doing to stay in such good shape? I have no idea. I didn't know I was doing anything.
What's all the canned food?
Just living. Yeah, that's the way it goes. So.
And you still talk to the other guys?
I'm sorry?
The 4 other guys, do you still talk to them?
Oh yeah. One of them in particular. The other 2, they're too far gone. They can't leave home at all. They can't. One of them can't even get out of bed. But this one guy he just recently decided he can't make it anymore. He's got to give up traveling and stay in. And I can understand it. I mean, I went down to Texas in an airplane to get there, and traveling is tough on you when you're old. You gotta be able to move fast, or people run over you for one thing, and it takes longer to get into an airplane and get your bags up on top without holding up a whole string of people in back of you, and you can't do anything. I'm sorry, excuse me, and they're unhappy because it's miserable taking trips anymore now compared to what it used to be. I remember when you took a trip, like I remember flying from Boston to San Francisco, and it took about 12 hours, and they fed us, I think, 4 times on that trip, 12 hours, and you could get extra food in between, you know, or drinks, whatever you wanted. And now you don't even get a thank you. You know, you're lucky if you get a drink of water. And I can understand why people get unhappy on these things, because all the way through it's hassle, hassle, hassle. You know, you start out, you have to know what time you can get an airplane, and then you have to find out how far is it from where you're going, and then you get to the airport and it's, grab this bag, get over there and work the computer. I can't even work this damn thing, and I go to the airport and they want me to work another computer. You know, that drives me crazy. When I was in the civilian workforce, we didn't even have computers yet. So now kids are getting them when they're in the first grade. Whenever I have trouble with my telephone or something, I always try to find a little kid and say, hey, I want to do so and so. And little devils will look there. And what did you do? Oh, it was easy. Oh yeah? Easy for you, difficult for me. But it's funny. I mean, you don't realize how you age until it's on you. And then, oh boy.